At my father's funeral, my husband declared, "Now it all belongs to me." Then I revealed something he never expected to hear. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The rain matched my tears that Tuesday morning. I stood at the edge of my father's grave, watching as they lowered the mahogany casket into the earth. 300 people had come to pay their respects to Richard Pemberton business partners, longtime employees, distant relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years but suddenly appeared when death made the headlines. My father had built an empire from nothing, and now everyone wanted to claim they knew him. But they didn't know him. Not like I did. I felt Michael's hand on my shoulder, supposedly comforting, but his touch felt cold through my black dress. He'd been the perfect husband that morning, helping me choose the flowers, greeting guests with just the right amount of solemnity, even shedding what looked like genuine tears during the eulogy. Anyone watching would have thought he was the devoted son-in-law, grieving alongside his wife. If only they knew the truth I'd been ignoring for 5 years. He was a good man, Michael whispered in my ear as the priest began the final prayers. He'll be missed. I nodded, unable to speak. The lump in my throat felt like it might choke me. Daddy had been everything to me after Mom died when I was 12. He'd raised me alone, taught me about business, about life, about people. Especially about people. Victoria. He'd said to me just 2 months ago when the cancer diagnosis came back worse than expected. Remember what I've always told you about the people in your life. That they're not always there because of me. I'd recited the familiar warning. Especially the ones closest to you. He'd added, his eyes growing distant. Money changes people, sweetheart. It makes them see you differently. Promise me you'll be careful. I'd promised, but I hadn't understood then why his eyes kept drifting to Michael during that conversation. Now, as they threw the first handfuls of dirt onto the casket, I understood everything. The reception was held at the Pemberton estate, my childhood home, the sprawling Georgian mansion that had been in our family for 3 generations. The house buzzed with quiet conversation and clinking glasses as 200 guests moved through the rooms where I'd grown up. I floated through it all like a ghost, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, playing the role of the grieving daughter. Michael was never far from my side, the devoted husband supporting his wife through her darkest hour. He worked the room expertly, shaking hands with Dad's business associates, charming the older relatives, making mental notes of who was who in the hierarchy of my father's empire. Your father spoke of you often, said Patricia Wellington, one of Dad's oldest business partners. He was so proud of you, and so grateful you found Michael. He said it gave him peace knowing you had someone to take care of you. Michael squeezed my hand. I promised Richard I'd always look after Victoria. He said with perfect sincerity. She's my whole world. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they made my skin crawl. I excused myself and walked to Dad's study, needing a moment alone. The room still smelled like his cologne and leather-bound books. His reading glasses sat on the desk next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. Everything exactly as he'd left it, as if he might walk in at any moment and ask me about my day. That's when I saw it. The sealed envelope on his desk with my name written in his careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Victoria, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you're probably surrounded by people who are either genuinely mourning or pretending to care because they think it might benefit them somehow. I've spent my whole life learning to tell the difference, and I tried to teach you the same skill. I need you to know that I've changed my will. Everything. The house, the companies, the accounts. It's all going into a trust. You'll receive the income, but the principal can never be touched by anyone else, including a spouse in the event of divorce. Your children will inherit when they turn 30, but until then, you control everything. I'm telling you this now because I suspect Michael married you for reasons that have nothing to do with love. I've watched him for 5 years, Victoria. I've seen how his eyes light up when we talk business, how he pays attention when money is discussed, how he's been positioning himself to take over when I'm gone. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the other women. I know about the conversations he's had with his brother about waiting for the old man to die. I wanted to tell you while I was alive, but I knew you'd defend him. You have your mother's heart. You see the good in people even when it isn't there. So I'm telling you now, when you need to hear it most. The will reading is tomorrow. Watch his face when they read the terms. Then you'll know I was right. You deserve better than Michael, sweetheart. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have. Don't waste any more years on a man who sees you as a paycheck. I love you always. Dad P.S. Check the bottom drawer of my desk. I left you something else. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely pull open the drawer. Inside was a thick folder labeled Michael Henderson Investigation Report and a small jewelry box. The box contained my mother's wedding ring, the one Dad had never been able to bring himself to put away after she died. I opened the folder with shaking fingers. Page after page of photographs, bank statements, phone records, credit card bills. Michael at casinos in Atlantic City. Michael with a blonde woman at a hotel in Philadelphia. Michael with a brunette at a restaurant in Manhattan. Michael on the phone with his brother discussing inheritance timelines and community property laws. The last page was a transcript of a recorded phone conversation from just 3 weeks ago. Michael. The doctors say he's got maybe a month left. Maybe 2 if he's lucky. Unknown male, identified as James Henderson, brother. And then, Michael. And then Victoria inherits everything, which means I inherit everything. The old man's worth at least $50 million, probably more. The Manhattan properties alone are worth 20. Unknown. Male. What if she finds out about the gambling? Michael. She won't. She's too busy playing the dutiful daughter. Besides, women like Victoria don't leave. They're too afraid of being alone. She'll forgive me for anything rather than admit she made a mistake. Unknown male. And if she doesn't? Michael. Community property, brother. Even if we divorce, I get half of everything. Either way, I win. I sat in Dad's leather chair, staring at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, feeling like the naive fool I apparently was. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of believing his I love yous and you're beautiful, and I'm so lucky to have you. 5 years of ignoring the little voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father's warnings. The door opened behind me. There you are. Michael's voice was soft with practiced concern. People are asking for you. The Harrisons wanted to Victoria? What's wrong? I looked up at him, this man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, and saw him clearly for the first time. The calculating eyes hidden behind false warmth. The way his gaze immediately went to the papers in my hands, assessing whether they were important, whether they affected him. Nothing's wrong, I said quietly, sliding the folder into the desk drawer. Just reading some of Dad's old letters. You know how it is. His relief was almost palpable. Of course, sweetheart. Take your time. But whenever you're ready, Mr. Patterson is here from the law firm. He'd like to schedule the will reading for tomorrow, if that works for you. Tomorrow is fine, I said, slipping my mother's ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Good. Michael moved closer, putting his hands on my shoulders. I know this is hard, Victoria, but we'll get through it together. Your father would want you to lean on me. Would he? I looked up at my husband's handsome face, the face that had charmed me at that charity gala 6 years ago, the face that had promised to love and protect me at our wedding. Had I ever really known the man behind it? Michael, I said softly, what do you think Dad left us? His hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. I don't know, honey. Does it matter? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. But I caught it. the flash of anticipation in his eyes quickly hidden. He'd been thinking about this, planning for this, probably for years. "I suppose you're right," I said. "We should get back to our guests." That evening, after the last guest had left and the caterers had cleaned up, Michael poured himself a scotch from Dad's bar. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, no longer needing to play the grieving son-in-law. "Hell of a day," he said, settling into Dad's favorite armchair like he belonged there. "Your father really knew how to draw a crowd. Even Senator Morrison showed up. Yes, Dad always said your network is your net worth." Michael nodded approvingly. "Smart man. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about the businesses. With the right management, we could probably double the revenue within 5 years. That real estate portfolio alone has massive potential if we leverage it correctly." "We?" He looked at me with surprise. "Well, yes. I mean, obviously you'll inherit everything, but I've got the MBA, the business experience. It makes sense for me to take over operations while you grieve and adjust." "While I what? Played the helpless widow while he ran my father's empire into the ground to cover his gambling debts?" "That's very thoughtful of you," I said carefully. "But maybe we should wait to see what the will actually says before making plans." Of course. I just want you to know that you don't have to worry about any of this business stuff. I'll handle everything." "I'll bet you will." The will reading was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Patterson, Morrison Associates, the law firm that had handled the Pemberton family's affairs for 30 years. I dressed carefully that morning black Armani suit, pearl earrings, my hair pulled back in a severe bun. I wanted to look like the daughter of Richard Pemberton, not some grieving widow who could be easily manipulated. Michael wore his best suit and carried a leather portfolio, as if he were attending a board meeting where he expected to be named CEO. He kept glancing at me during the drive, clearly puzzled by my composed demeanor. "You seem different today," he said as we pulled into the parking garage. "Do I?" "More like your father, I guess. All business." If only he knew how much like my father I was about to become. The conference room was paneled in dark wood and lined with law books that probably hadn't been opened in decades. George Patterson, Dad's longtime attorney, sat at the head of a polished table with several folders spread before him. He was 73 years old, sharp as a tack, and had probably seen every kind of family drama money could create. "Victoria, Michael, please sit down." His voice was professionally neutral, but I caught him studying Michael with what looked like barely concealed distaste. "I want to extend my condolences again. Your father was a remarkable man and a valued client." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson," I said. "I know Dad trusted you completely." Michael shifted in his seat, clearly eager to get to the point. "We appreciate that, George. Victoria's been through hell this week. The sooner we can get the estate settled, the better." Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly at the familiar use of his first name and the presumptuous "we." "Of course. Let me begin by saying that Richard was very specific about his wishes. He updated his will just 6 weeks ago, and I advised him of all the implications." 6 weeks ago, right around the time he'd hired the private investigator. "The bulk of Richard's estate," Mr. Patterson continued, "including all business interests, real estate holdings, and investment accounts, will be placed in the Victoria Pemberton Trust. Victoria, you will receive all income generated by the trust, but the principal cannot be accessed by anyone other than your direct descendants, and only when they reach the age of 30. Michael leaned forward. "I'm sorry. What does that mean exactly?" "It means, Mr. Patterson said with what I was beginning to recognize as satisfaction, that while Victoria benefits from the estate, the assets themselves are protected from any claims by creditors, lawsuits, or..." He paused meaningfully. "Spouses in the event of divorce." The color drained from Michael's face. "But surely, as her husband, I would have some involvement in managing..." "No." Mr. Patterson's voice was firm. "The trust specifically excludes any participation by spouses. Victoria has sole discretion over all decisions, and she's named me as co-trustee to ensure the terms are followed. I watched my husband's dreams of easy wealth crumble in real time. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The portfolio he'd brought, probably full of plans for improving Dad's businesses, sat forgotten on the table. "There must be some mistake," Michael said, his voice rising. "Richard and I discussed this. He knew I had the experience to help Victoria manage everything." "I'm sure you did discuss it," Mr. Patterson said dryly. Richard was very thorough in his research before making these decisions. The weight of those words hung in the air. Michael's face went from pale to red as the implications sank in. He turned to me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw him without the mask of false charm. "Victoria, you have to contest this. This isn't what your father would have wanted. He knew you'd need help." "Did he?" I interrupted quietly. Or did he know exactly what he was doing? Something in my tone must have warned him because his eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I reached into my purse and pulled out a single photograph. Michael at the casino, chips stacked in front of him. A woman who definitely wasn't me draped over his shoulder. I placed it on the conference table between us. "It means," I said, my voice steady as steel, "that Dad knew about Atlantic City. He knew about Philadelphia and Manhattan. He knew about the gambling debts and the other women and the phone calls to your brother discussing inheritance timelines." Michael stared at the photograph like it was a snake that might bite him. When he looked up, all pretense was gone. This was the real Michael, the one who'd been hiding behind 5 years of lies. "You've been spying on me?" "I didn't have to. Dad did that for me." I placed another photo on the table, then another. "He hired investigators, Michael. He has recordings of your conversations, photographs of your activities, bank records showing every bet you placed and every debt you accumulated." "Victoria, I can explain." Can you? Can you explain why you married me? Because I'd love to hear this." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should give you some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "Stay. I want a witness for this." Michael looked around the room like a trapped animal, realizing that his carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. "Victoria, you have to understand I love you." "Do you?" I stood up, and suddenly I felt taller than I had in years. "Because according to your brother, women like me don't leave. We're too afraid of being alone. We'll forgive anything rather than admit we made a mistake." His face went ashen. "Victoria, that's not... You were just counting my father's money before he was dead." My voice was ice. "You were planning how to spend my inheritance while I was picking out his funeral flowers." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and it sounded strange even to me. "You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what would be fair, Michael. Fair would be you loving me for who I am instead of what I have. Fair would be you being faithful to your marriage vows. Fair would be you grieving with me instead of celebrating what you thought you were about to inherit." He tried one last desperate play. "Victoria, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Marriage is about forgiveness." "You're right," I said, pulling off my wedding ring and setting it on the table next to the photographs. "It is about forgiveness, but it's also about honesty, loyalty, and love, none of which you've shown me. You can't just throw away 5 years. I'm not throwing them away. You already did that." I gathered the photographs and put them back in my purse. "Mr. Patterson, please have divorce papers prepared. I'll be citing irreconcilable differences, though I think adultery and fraud would be more accurate." Michael jumped up from his chair. "Victoria, wait. You're upset? You're not thinking clearly." "Actually, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 5 years." I turned to face him fully, and I knew he could see my father's steel in my eyes. "You made one critical error, Michael. You underestimated both my father and me. He protected me even from the grave, and I'm strong enough to walk away from a man who never deserved me in the first place. You'll regret this. he said, his mask finally slipping completely. You'll be alone. No one will want you except for your money. And now you won't even have that to offer. I smiled then. Really smiled. For the first time in days. Actually, Michael, I'll have something much better than money. I'll have my self-respect back. And I'll never again have to wonder if the man sleeping next to me loves me or loves my bank account. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. He stood there in his expensive suit, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, like a child who'd been caught stealing cookies. Oh, and Michael? The house belongs to the trust, too. You have 30 days to move out. I left him standing there in the conference room, probably calculating how much his lawyer was going to cost and wondering how he'd explain this to his brother. Mr. Patterson followed me into the hallway. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so. I looked back toward the closed conference room door. He was right, about people only being there for what they can get. Not all people, Victoria. The right person will love you for exactly who you are. Maybe. But for now, I had myself, and that felt like enough. That evening, I sat in Dad's study with a glass of wine, sorting through the investigator's files. Michael had come home long enough to pack a few bags, slamming doors and muttering about ungrateful bitches and crazy old men. I'd watched from the window as he loaded his BMW and drove away, probably to stay with his brother while he figured out his next move. The house felt different already. Lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from its foundation. I found myself looking at my parents' wedding photo on Dad's desk. They'd been so young, so hopeful. Mom had died too soon, but she'd had 20 years of being truly loved. That was more than I'd had in 5 years with Michael. My phone buzzed. A text from my college roommate, Sarah. Saw the news about your dad. I'm so sorry, Vic. Call me if you need anything. Real friends. People who cared about me, not what I could give them. How had I let Michael isolate me from them so gradually that I barely noticed? I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah's number. Victoria. Oh, honey, how are you holding up? For the first time in days, I felt tears coming not from grief or betrayal, but from relief. I'm actually okay. Better than okay. I think Dad just gave me the best gift he could have. What do you mean? He showed me who I really am, and who I don't want to be married to. Oh my God, Victoria, what happened? So I told her everything. About the investigation, the will, the confrontation in the lawyer's office. Sarah listened without judgment, occasionally gasping or swearing on my behalf. I'm proud of you, she said when I finished. That took incredible strength. Did it? Or was I just finally doing what I should have done years ago? Both. But you did it when it mattered most. Your dad raised you right. After we hung up, I walked through the house that was now truly mine. Every room held memories of growing up here, of Sunday morning pancakes with Dad, of him teaching me to play chess in the library, of graduation parties and birthday celebrations and quiet evenings reading together. This was my inheritance, not just the money or the businesses, but the values Dad had instilled in me. The strength to stand up for myself, the wisdom to recognize people's true motivations, the courage to choose my own path, even when it meant walking alone. I paused in front of the mirror in the front hallway, the same mirror where Dad used to check his tie every morning before work. The woman looking back at me had his eyes determined, clear, uncompromising. She also had something she'd been missing for 5 years. She looked free. Tomorrow I would start over. I'd run Dad's businesses the way he'd taught me. I'd reconnect with real friends. I'd maybe even date again someday. But this time I'd trust my instincts about people's motives. But tonight, I would grieve properly for the father who had loved me enough to protect me from my own poor judgment. The father who had seen through Michael's charm from the very beginning and had the wisdom to let me figure it out for myself, while making sure I'd have the tools I needed when that moment came. I raised my wine glass to his portrait hanging above the mantelpiece. Thank you, Dad, I whispered, for everything. Outside, it started to rain again. But this time, I wasn't crying. 3 months later, I was reviewing quarterly reports in Dad's old office when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Pemberton, there's a Michael Henderson here to see you. He says he's your former husband?" I almost smiled. Former husband. I liked the sound of that. "Send him in, please." Michael walked into the office looking nothing like the polished businessman who had married me 6 years ago. His hair was unkempt, his suit was wrinkled, and he had the desperate look of someone who had run out of options. "Victoria, you look good." I did look good. I joined a yoga class, started painting again, bought clothes that I liked instead of ones that would please a husband who was never pleased anyway. I felt good too. "What can I do for you, Michael?" I wanted to apologize. For everything. I made terrible mistakes and I hurt you, and I'm sorry. "I accept your apology." He seemed surprised by how easily I'd said it. I was hoping. Maybe we could try again? "I've changed, Victoria. I've learned from my mistakes." "Have you? What have you learned?" "That you can't put a price on love. That family is more important than money. That I was an idiot to risk what we had." "And what did we have, Michael?" He floundered for a moment. We were happy." "Were we? Were you happy with me? Or with what you thought I represented?" "I was happy with you. With us?" "Then why did you cheat on me?" I was confused. Why did you marry me, Michael?" "Because I loved you." I opened the folder on my desk and pulled out a transcript of one of his phone calls with his brother, made just 2 weeks after our wedding. "She's completely clueless," I read aloud. "Thinks I married her for love. The old man's worth at least $30 million, and she's his only heir. I just have to keep her happy for a few years until he dies." Michael's face went white. "Victoria, I was just talking. I didn't mean..." "You meant every word." I closed the folder. "Do you want to know why I can forgive you, Michael? Because you did me a favor. You showed me that I'm stronger than I thought I was. You showed me that I don't need anyone who doesn't genuinely want to be with me. You showed me the difference between being loved and being used. I can change. I'm sure you can, but you'll have to do it for someone else." I stood up. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. Is there anything else?" He stood there for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that the woman in front of him was not the same person he'd married. This woman wouldn't be manipulated or charmed or frightened into accepting less than she deserved. "I heard you're seeing someone," he said finally. "I am. Dr. James Morrison, a widowed pediatric surgeon who volunteered at the same children's hospital where I'd started donating my time. A man who had asked me out 3 times before I'd said yes, because he wanted to make sure I was ready. A man who'd never asked about my finances or my father's businesses, but who listened when I talked about my day and laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand during movies. Is he..." Michael couldn't quite bring himself to ask. "Is he marrying me for my money?" I smiled. "No, Michael. He doesn't need my money. He has his own career, his own life, his own interests. He likes me for who I am, not what I have. Imagine that." Michael's shoulders sagged in defeat. "I really did love you, Victoria. Maybe not the right way, but..." "Maybe you did, in your way. But it wasn't enough. And I deserve more than maybe and not the right way. I deserve someone who loves me completely. Honestly, faithfully. Someone who doesn't see me as a means to an end." He nodded slowly and walked toward the door. Then he stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth, I think your father was right about me." "Yes," I said gently. "He was. But he was also right about me. He knew I was strong enough to figure it out eventually." After he left, I sat back down at Dad's desk. My desk now, and looked at the family photo I'd placed next to my computer. Mom and Dad on their 10th wedding anniversary, looking at each other like they shared the most wonderful secret in the world. Someday, maybe I'd have that kind of love. The real kind. the kind that saw all of you and chose to stay anyway. But even if I never found it, I'd learned something invaluable from Michael's betrayal. I was complete on my own. I didn't need someone else to make me whole or happy or worthy. I could be all of those things by myself. And that knowledge, that strength, that self-respect, those were the real gifts my father had left me. Worth more than all the money in his trust fund. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Pemberton, Dr. Morrison is here for your lunch appointment." I smiled and touched my mother's ring, which I now wore on my right hand, a reminder of true love and my own worth. "Send him in, please." Some stories end with revenge. Some end with reconciliation. Mine ended with something better, with me finally understanding that I had never needed saving. I had only needed to remember who I was, and now I had.